You are going to rot in here, old woman. The only way you are leaving this property is in a pine box." The words did not sound like they belonged to a human being, much less the boy I had nursed through chicken pox and held through nightmares. They were the growl of a cornered animal. My son's hands, once so small they could barely grasp my finger, were now large, rough, and shoving me violently backward. I stumbled, my heel catching on the uneven threshold, and fell hard onto the dusty floorboards of the detached garden shed. The smell of gasoline, dry rot, and ancient fertilizer filled my nose instantly, the scent of neglect. Before I could scramble to my feet, the heavy wooden door slammed shut. The darkness was immediate, absolute, swallowing me whole. Then came the sound that would haunt me for the rest of my days, the sharp, metallic click of the padlock sliding home on the outside. "Julian!" I screamed, the name tearing at my throat. "Julian, please, it's cold. Let me out." "Shut up." His voice was muffled by the wood but still vibrated with a rage I couldn't comprehend. "You stay there and think about where that deed is. When you're ready to stop playing games and sign over the house, maybe we'll bring you some water. Until then, enjoy the silence." "Don't waste your breath explaining it to her, Julian." A woman's voice cut through the chilly evening air, sharp, nasal, and terrifyingly calm. It was Isabella. "She's stubborn. Let the cold freeze the stubbornness out of her. We have a cruise to pack for, remember?" Footsteps crunched on the gravel, receding toward the main house, my house. Then silence. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, a frantic rhythm that threatened to crack my sternum. I was 68 years old. The damp cold of the Seattle autumn was already seeping through the thin fabric of my cardigan, settling into my arthritic joints. I reached into my pocket for my phone, my fingers trembling so violently I nearly dropped it. I illuminated the screen, desperate for a signal, for 911, for anyone. The screen shattered against the wall a second later. I hadn't thrown it. The memory of Julian snatching it from me just minutes before the shed, smashing it against the porch railing, and throwing the broken pieces at my feet replayed in my mind. I was holding nothing but a phantom hope. I was completely alone, abandoned like an unwanted dog in the backyard of the home I had scrubbed, polished, and paid for with 40 years of blood and sweat. As the temperature dropped and the shadows in the shed lengthened into night, I pulled my knees to my chest. I didn't cry. I was past tears. Instead, in the dark, I let my mind drift back, trying to find the exact moment where my beautiful golden-haired boy had died, and this monster had taken his place. My name is Clara Vance. For 4 decades, I defined myself by a single word: mother. I wasn't just a mother. I was a fortress. I had constructed a life designed to shield Julian from the harsh realities of our existence. My husband, a man whose charm was only exceeded by his cowardice, walked out on us when Julian was 7. He left a note on the refrigerator and empty bank accounts. I didn't have time to mourn the marriage. I had a second grader who needed braces and a future. I worked at the textile mill in the industrial district, surrounded by the deafening roar of industrial looms and the smell of chemical dyes. My official shift ended at 5, but my day never did. I took in private tailoring commissions, ruining my eyesight under the dim yellow bulb of my kitchen table, stitching intricate lace into wedding gowns I would never wear, hemming suits for businessmen who looked through me as if I were part of the furniture. I remember a specific Tuesday in November. The rain in Seattle was relentless, a gray curtain that soaked everything to the bone. Julian came home from middle school, his face streaked with mud and tears. He threw his backpack on the floor and collapsed onto the sofa. "I'm not going back," he sobbed, his small body shaking. Kyle and the others. They laughed at my shoes. They said I shop at the dumpster. I looked at his feet. His sneakers were splitting at the seams, the rubber sole flapping open like a hungry mouth. I had glued them twice that month. The shame, hot and heavy in my chest, was not for me, but for him. That night, while Julian slept the heavy sleep of the exhausted, I went to the tin box hidden behind the loose brick in the pantry. Inside was the money I had been saving for 3 years to fix my cracked molar, a tooth that sent jolts of lightning through my jaw every time I drank cold water. I counted the bills. It was enough. The next morning, Julian walked to school wearing brand new high-top basketball sneakers, the kind the popular athletes wore. The molar went unfixed. Eventually, it rotted and had to be pulled, leaving a gap in the back of my mouth that my tongue still worried at nervously. But seeing Julian walk out that door with his head held high, that was worth every second of pain. That was the pattern of our lives. I was the fuel. He was the rocket. When he turned 18, I took extra shifts on the weekends, scrubbing floors at the hospital, to buy him the used sedan he needed to commute to his internship. When he was 22, I refinanced the Victorian house I had fought tooth and nail to keep, pulling out every cent of equity to pay for his tuition at the University of Washington School of Architecture. "I want to build things, Mom," he had told me, his eyes shining with ambition. "I want to build skyscrapers that touch the clouds, and when I make it big, I'm going to build you a palace." I didn't want a palace. I just wanted him. He graduated top of his class. I sat in the nosebleed section of the stadium, wearing a dress I had made myself from remnant fabric, clapping until my hands stung. He looked so handsome in his gown, so polished, so far removed from the boy with the broken sneakers. For the first few years of his career, things were good. He was busy, climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious firm downtown, but he came for Sunday dinner. He brought wine. He kissed my cheek. He told me about his designs, about the glass and steel structures that were reshaping the skyline. "You made this possible, Mom," he would say, savoring my pot roast. "I am who I am because of you." Then he met Isabella. The shift wasn't sudden. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing down stone. Isabella was 30. An interior designer with eyes like polished flint and a smile that looked like it had been surgically applied. She came from money, old money, the kind that didn't speak about price tags because they didn't have to. The first time Julian brought her home, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty windows of my old house. She walked in, leaving her heels on despite my polite request to remove them, and surveyed my living room with the clinical detachment of a health inspector. "It's quaint," she said, the word dripping with condescension. "Very rustic. It smells like—" "What is that? Cabbage?" "It's pot roast," I said, forcing a smile. "Julian's favorite." "Oh, we don't eat red meat anymore," she announced, linking her arm through Julian's. "It's terrible for the complexion and the arteries. Julian is on a plant-based regimen now. Aren't you, darling?" Julian, my boy who used to beg for seconds of gravy, just nodded. "Yeah, Mom, we're trying to be healthier." I threw the roast away that night. It was the first of many things I would discard to make room for Isabella. The wedding was the first major blow. I had dreamed of his wedding since he was a baby. I imagined dancing with him, fixing his tie, welcoming a daughter into my heart. Instead, I received a printed itinerary in the mail 2 weeks before the date. When I called Julian, confused, he sounded strained. "Look, Mom, Isabella's parents are handling the wedding. It's a very formal affair. Black tie. They have a specific vision." "I can make a dress," I offered. "I have some beautiful silk—" "No," he cut me off. "Isabella has selected a dress for you. It will be sent to your house. Please just wear it. Don't make a scene." The dress arrived in a box. It was beige, shapeless, a garment designed to make the wearer disappear into the wallpaper. At the reception, held in a ballroom that cost more than my house was worth, I was seated at table 19, near the kitchen doors. The speeches were given by Isabella's father, by Julian's boss, by Isabella's maid of honor. No one asked the mother of the groom to speak. I watched from the shadows as my son danced with his new wife, whispering in her ear, laughing at her jokes. He looked at her with a desperate sort of adoration, like a man trying to catch a falling star. He didn't look at me once. After the wedding, the silence grew. The Sunday dinners stopped. "We're busy," Julian would text. "Isabella is tired. We have a gala." When I did see them, it was only when they needed something. Julian needed me to hem his expensive Italian suits because the tailor downtown charged too much. Isabella needed me to store boxes of her out-of-season wardrobe in my basement because their minimalist condo didn't have clutter space. I became a utility, a storage unit, a free seamstress. The cruelty became casual, open. "Clara, you really should do something about this furniture," Isabella said one afternoon, sipping tea I had bought specifically for her. "It's so depressing. It looks like an estate sale waiting to happen." "It's my home, Isabella," I said softly. "It's an asset," she corrected, her eyes scanning the crown molding. "Julian, did you know this lot is zoned for multi-family units? You could tear this drafty monstrosity down and put up 4 luxury townhomes. The passive income would be incredible." "Don't talk about tearing down my house," I said, my voice shaking. Julian didn't defend me. He looked at the ceiling, calculating. "The location is good, Mom. You have to admit it's a lot of space for one old woman. You rattle around in here. I raised you in this house." "And I grew up," he snapped. "You should too." The breaking point, or what I thought was the breaking point, came 6 months ago. I caught a viral pneumonia that settled deep in my lungs. I lay in my bed for 3 days, burning with fever, coughing until I tasted copper. I was too weak to make soup, too dizzy to walk to the kitchen. I called Julian. "Mom, I can't right now," he answered, loud music thumping in the background. "We're at a wine tasting in Napa. It's a networking event." "Julian, I'm sick," I wheezed. I might need a doctor. Can you call someone?" "It's probably just the flu." Isabella's voice drifted through the phone. "Tell her to take some vitamin C and sleep it off. She's always so dramatic when she wants attention." "Did you hear that, Mom?" Julian said, impatience bleeding into his tone. "Just sleep it off. You're fine. We'll stop by next week when we're back." He hung up. I didn't die, thanks to Mrs. Gable next door, who noticed I hadn't taken out the trash cans. She found me semi-conscious and called the ambulance. I spent a week in the hospital. Julian never visited. He sent a text. "Glad you're okay. Super busy at work. Talk soon." Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the sterile white ceiling, something inside me shifted. The unconditional love I had carried for 32 years didn't disappear, but it changed. It calcified. It turned into something cold and hard and protective. I realized then that the son I loved was a ghost. The man who existed now was a stranger who viewed me as an inconvenience, an obstacle between him and his inheritance. When I came home, I didn't call him to complain. I didn't cry. I went to work. I bought a new laptop. I hired a security specialist, a friend of Mrs. Gable's grandson. I installed tiny, high-definition cameras in the living room, the kitchen, and the porch. I bought a digital voice recorder that fit in my pocket, and I waited. The demands for money started a month later. They wanted a new car, then a vacation. Then they needed help with a down payment on a vacation home. "It's an investment, Mom," Julian argued, pacing my living room while the camera hidden in the bookshelf spine recorded every frame. "You're sitting on cash. Why hoard it? We're your family." "I need that money for my retirement, Julian. For my care." "We will take care of you," Isabella laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "My God, Clara, do you think we'd let you starve? But right now, the market is hot. We need liquidity." I gave them small amounts at first just to get them on tape acknowledging the loans. I made Julian sign IOUs, which he did with a sneer, calling me petty. Then came today. The climax. They showed up unannounced at 4 p.m. Julian looked manic, his tie loosened, sweat beading on his forehead. Isabella looked furious. "We need the deed," Julian said, bypassing the greeting. "And we need you to sign a power of attorney." "What?" I stood by the fireplace, my hand instinctively going to the pocket where my recorder was running. "Why?" "Julian made a bad call," Isabella spat, glaring at her husband. "A bad investment. He leveraged our assets. If we don't cover the margin call by Monday, we lose the condo. We lose everything." "So you want to take my house?" I asked, my voice steady. "We're not taking it," Julian shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "We're leveraging it. We'll pay it back. But I need the deed, and I need control of your accounts so the bank sees we have collateral. Sign the papers, Mom." "No," I said. The silence stretched, thin and dangerous. "What did you say?" Julian whispered. "I said no. I worked 40 years for this home. I scrubbed floors. I ruined my hands. I will not gamble it away to fix your mistakes." That was when the violence started. The shouting, the throwing of the vase, my mother's vase, against the wall. He cornered me, demanding to know where the safe was. When I wouldn't speak, he grabbed me by the arm, dragged me out the back door, and shoved me into the shed. "You'll rot in here until you remember where the combination is." And that brings us back to the darkness, the cold, the smell of gasoline. I sat in that shed for what felt like hours, but must have been only one. My fear had evaporated, replaced by a crystalline clarity. They thought they had trapped me. They thought I was a helpless old woman trembling in the dark. They didn't know about the spare key taped beneath the workbench. I waited until the lights in the main house went on. I could see them through the cracks in the wood, shadows moving past the kitchen window, opening drawers, ransacking my sanctuary. They were looking for the safe. I felt around in the dark until my fingers brushed the cold metal of the key. I inserted it into the padlock from the inside. There was a gap in the rotting door frame wide enough for my hand if I twisted it painfully. I gritted my teeth, ignoring the scrape of splintered wood against my skin, and turned. The lock clicked open. I didn't run to the neighbors. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I slipped out of the shed and moved through the shadows of my own garden, silent as a ghost. I crept to the basement bulkhead doors, which I kept oiled and unlocked. I descended into the basement. This was my command center. On the wall, hidden behind a curtain, was my evidence board. Printouts of bank statements showing the money they had drained, the IOUs, the transcripts of voicemails where Isabella called me a useless leech. And on the desk, my laptop was humming. I sat down. I opened the software Mrs. Gable's grandson had installed. The screen showed the live feed from the living room upstairs. Julian was throwing books off the shelves. Isabella was screaming at him. "You said she was weak, Julian. You said she would just give it to us." "She will," Julian roared. "We just have to break her, leave her in the shed tonight. Tomorrow morning, when she's freezing and hungry, she'll sign anything." "She better," Isabella hissed, "because I am not moving into a rental apartment. If we lose this lifestyle, I am leaving you, Julian. I mean it. You're not leaving me. We just need her money. The old hag doesn't need it. She's going to die soon anyway." I listened to my son, the boy I had bought sneakers for, the boy I had worshipped, sentence me to death by exposure for a paycheck. I took a deep breath. I opened a second window on my laptop. It was a Zoom link. Waiting in the digital lobby were 4 people. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a representative from Adult Protective Services, Mrs. Gable, and Elias Thorne, an investigative journalist for the Seattle Times who'd been looking for a story on elder financial abuse. I clicked Admit All. "Hello, everyone," I whispered into the microphone. "Thank you for joining me. I hope you are recording." "We are, Clara," Mr. Henderson said, his face grim on the screen. "We are seeing everything." "Good. Watch this." I connected the laptop to the house's PA system, a Bluetooth speaker setup Julian had installed years ago so he could play jazz throughout the house during parties. I turned the volume to maximum. Then I unmuted my microphone. "Hello, Julian. Hello, Isabella." My voice boomed through the living room upstairs like the voice of God. On the camera feed, I saw them freeze. Julian dropped a porcelain figurine. Isabella spun around, eyes wild. "What the hell?" Julian screamed. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm in the only place you never look," I said into the mic. "I'm in the foundation of this house, just like I've been the foundation of your life." "Come out," he yelled, running toward the basement door. "I swear to God, Mom." "I wouldn't open that door if I were you," I said calmly, "because right now, everything you are saying and everything you have done for the last hour is being live-streamed to my attorney, the police, and the press." Julian froze with his hand on the doorknob. "You're lying." "Am I? Ask Mr. Henderson." I patched the audio through. "Good evening, Julian." The lawyer's baritone voice filled the room. "I currently have video evidence of assault, false imprisonment, and attempted extortion. The police have been notified and are approximately 3 minutes away." Isabella's face went white, a stark, deathly white. She looked at Julian, then at the door. "You idiot," she whispered. "You told me she was senile." I... Julian stammered, looking at the ceiling speakers. "Mom, please. It was a joke. We were just trying to scare you because we were desperate. We're family." "Family," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "You locked me in a shed, Julian. You planned to leave me there to freeze until I gave you my life savings." "I wasn't going to leave you. I was going to come back in an hour. Mom, please, I'll lose my license. If I get arrested, I lose everything." "You lost everything the moment you raised your hand against the woman who gave you life," I said. Blue and red lights flashed through the front window, illuminating the living room in a chaotic strobe. The sirens cut through the night, loud and demanding. "That's your ride, Julian," I said. I watched on the screen as the officers kicked down the front door. I saw them tackle my son to the ground when he tried to run. I saw Isabella screaming, claiming she was a victim, that he forced her to do it. I watched them being handcuffed and led away. Only then did I turn off the monitor. I sat in the silence of the basement, surrounded by the evidence of my heartbreak. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt light. The heaviness of the last few years, the walking on eggshells, the desperate hope that he would love me again, the fear of his rejection, it was all gone. 3 months later. The scandal was significant. Elias Thorne's article, "The Architect of Greed," was syndicated nationally. It sparked a conversation about elder abuse that rippled through the city. Julian lost his job. He lost his license to practice architecture. Isabella filed for divorce before the bail hearing was even over, though she was charged as an accomplice and ended up doing community service and probation. I didn't visit Julian in jail. I did, however, see him one last time. It was a Tuesday. Raining just like that day he came home with the broken sneakers. He was out on bail awaiting sentencing. He came to my door. He looked terrible, gaunt, unshaven, his arrogance stripped away to reveal the frightened child underneath. I opened the door but left the security chain on. "Mom," he choked out, "I have nowhere to go. Everyone hates me. I can't get a job. I'm sleeping in my car." I looked at him through the 3-inch gap. I saw the resemblance to his father, the weakness around the mouth, but I also saw the little boy I had loved more than life itself. "I'm sorry you're struggling, Julian," I said gently. "Let me in," he begged. "Please, I'll change, I promise. I'll take care of the garden, I'll cook. Just let me come home." It would have been so easy. Every instinct in my biology screamed at me to open the door, to feed him, to fix him. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We fix, we sacrifice, we bleed so they can live. But then I remembered the sound of the padlock clicking. I remembered the cold of the shed. I remembered him laughing about me dying soon. I realized then that loving him meant holding him accountable. Enabling him had created a monster. Perhaps consequences could create a man. "You are home, Julian," I said. "The world out there? That is the home you built for yourself. You are the architect. Now you have to live in it. Mom, please, I love you. I love you too, I said, and I meant it. I love you enough to let you save yourself because I can't do it anymore. I closed the door. I heard him crying on the porch, pounding on the wood. I stood there, my hand resting on the deadbolt, tears streaming down my face. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, harder than the double shifts, harder than the loneliness. But as I walked back into my warm, quiet living room, a room that was finally, truly mine, I realized something profound. We spend our lives building foundations for others, thinking that if we make them strong enough, they will shelter us in return. But sometimes you have to tear the house down to realize that the only shelter you can truly rely on is the one you build within yourself. I sat in my armchair, picked up my sewing needle, and for the first time in years, I began to stitch a pattern just for me. A bright, vibrant red, the color of life, the color of survival. I was Clara Vance. I was 68, and my life was just beginning.